Okay, so I've been sitting here for like 20 minutes trying to figure out where to even start with this. I've read some of the stories on here before. The custody stuff, the job losses, the moments where you just feel like the whole world decided to use you as a punching bag for no reason. And I always thought, man, I feel for these guys, but that's not going to be me. I'm too careful, too quiet. I keep my head down, do my work, go home to my kid. Simple. Yeah, famous last words. I'm going to tell you what happened to me. All of it. And I'm telling it because I need somewhere to put it. Not because I want sympathy. Not because I'm looking for someone to pat me on the back. I'm telling it because if even one guy on here is going through something similar and feels like he's losing his mind, I want him to know, you're not crazy. Sometimes the thing that looks like it's going to destroy you is actually the thing that ends up changing everything. But you don't get to see that part right away. First, you got to go through the fire, and brother, that fire was hot. So here's the context, because you need it to understand why that morning hit the way it did. My name's Marcus. I'm 34. I'm a maintenance technician at a high-rise called Hale Tower. Or at least, I was. I've been doing building maintenance for 11 years. I know how to fix a pressure valve at 2 in the morning with one hand and a flashlight in my teeth. I know which pipes in which buildings have micro-corrosion and which ones are just noisy. I know which elevator motors are starting to wear down before the diagnostic software even picks it up. That's the kind of thing you learn when you've been invisible for long enough. You start paying attention to everything because nobody's paying attention to you. I'm a single dad. My daughter Lily is 6 years old. She's got her mother's nose and my stubbornness. And she sleeps with a stuffed rabbit named Captain Biscuit who's missing half his left ear. Because she's been tugging on it since she was 2. Every single morning before she says one word, she makes this sound. It's hard to describe. It's like a long, low hum, like she's warming up her engine before she starts the day. And then she says, "Daddy," in this voice that sounds like the word was invented specifically for that moment. That sound is the reason I do any of this. All of it. Every shift. Every cold meal. Every night I drive home when I should have been asleep hours ago. Her mom, my ex, Jennifer, left when Lily was 18 months old. That's a whole other story I'm not going to get into tonight. What you need to know is that by the time this whole thing happened, Lily had been with me full-time for almost 4 years. Jennifer came around sometimes, not consistently, not in any way that Lily could count on, but enough that the courts still considered her present. That detail matters later. Hold on to it. So, that Saturday, I'd been on shift since Thursday morning. I know, in 42 hours. But here's how that works when you're the guy who shows up. You don't say no. Not because you're a pushover, but because you know what it means if the job doesn't get done. I'd fixed a pressure issue on floors 14 through 17 that had been grinding through the weekend crew's nerves since Friday. 2 younger guys had tagged out, couldn't crack it. I cracked it. Repressurized the whole line, wrote up the service report in the secondary log, and by 3 in the morning I was heading back up to the 41st floor to return a specialty wrench to the maintenance cabinet near the CEO's suite. Now look, I need you to understand what 42 hours without real sleep feels like in a body that already carries 10 years of physical work in its joints. My lower back had been sending me dull signals since midnight, the kind that aren't quite pain but aren't comfort either. Just this steady low-frequency reminder that you are not 23 anymore, and your body is keeping score. My eyes were doing that thing where the edges of things go slightly soft, like the world's been turned down by about 10%. I was functioning. I was professional. But I was running on something closer to memory than actual energy. I returned the wrench, signed the log, and then I saw the office door, the CEO's private office, standing just slightly open. Not wide open. Just that little bit. A thin strip of amber light across the floor of the anteroom. I pushed it to close it. It swung inward instead. The latch was worn. Strike plate was off by maybe 3 millimeters. Seasonal building shift, the kind of thing that happens in tall structures over time. I'd flagged something similar on 29 a couple months back. I stepped inside to check it. Just to look. Just to document it in my log. And then I saw the chair. I don't know if you've ever been so exhausted that your body makes a decision before your brain catches up. That's the only way I can describe what happened. That chair was the most expensive thing I'd ever been close to. Dark gray leather so soft it looked like it had never been touched by someone who worked for a living, positioned behind a desk that probably cost more than my truck. I sat down, just for a second, just to jot the latch dimensions in my notepad. I was out in under 2 minutes. Not the kind of sleep where you drift. The kind where your body just pulls the plug. No warning. No negotiation. Just gone. I don't know exactly how long I was out before the lights came on. What I remember is white. Absolute, blinding, surgical white. The kind of light that doesn't just wake you up. It interrogates you. And before I even had both eyes open, I heard a voice. Clipped, controlled, precise. Security. There's a maintenance employee sleeping in my private office. I need him out. Now. I was on my feet before I understood what was happening. My body just reacted. Years of shift work will do that to you. You learn to come online fast. And there she was. Victoria Hale herself, still in her travel clothes, phone in one hand, the other hand already pulling away from the light switch. She was looking at me the way you look at something you found on the bottom of your shoe. Not scared. Not even angry. Not exactly. It was colder than anger. It was contempt that had been organized into policy. And she had her phone up. I heard the shutter sound before my brain registered what it meant. I said, "I'm heading out. The latch on your door needs to be reset. I noted it in the secondary log." My voice came out steady. I don't know how. I was still half in the fog of sleep, my back aching, my eyes adjusting, and this woman was standing there having just photographed me in her chair like I was evidence of something. She said, "You were sleeping in my chair?" I said, "Yes, that was wrong of me." That was it. That was all I gave her. Because there was nothing else to say that would have mattered in that room, at that moment to that person. I picked up my toolbox and I walked toward the door. The security guys were already in the hallway when I got there. 2 of them. Both built wide, with pressed shirts and the kind of blank professional expressions that mean they've done this enough times to stop thinking about it. They looked at me like I was a situation to be managed. I went with them. Didn't make it hard. Didn't say anything I'd regret. Didn't look back. But here's the thing I couldn't shake as they walked me to the elevator. And I'm talking about this specific feeling, the one that settled into my chest somewhere between the 41st floor and the lobby. It wasn't humiliation. I know what humiliation feels like. This wasn't that. It was dread. The quiet, specific dread of a man who knows something is moving in a direction he can't stop, and who also knows that the most important thing in his life is sleeping 23 minutes away with one ear on a stuffed rabbit. I got to my truck. Sat in the parking garage for a few minutes without starting the engine. The garage at that hour is its own kind of silence. Not peaceful, not uncomfortable, just absolute. Concrete and fluorescent hum and the smell of oil and cold air. I've spent a lot of time in garages like that. There's something honest about them. I called Lily's babysitter, Mrs. Patterson, 71 years old, retired school librarian, keeps butterscotch candies in a ceramic dish shaped like a frog on her kitchen counter, just to check in. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she wasn't fully asleep either. "She's good, hun," she said. "She asked about you twice before bed. I told her you were fixing something important." There was a small pause, and then she said, "Were you?" And I said, "Yeah, I was." And I meant it even then. I drove home. I made it in 21 minutes because the bridge was empty, and the city was the quietest version of itself. I let myself in, went straight to Lily's room and stood in the doorway for probably 30 seconds just watching her breathe. Captain Biscuit was tucked under her arm. Her hair was doing that thing where it fans out against the pillow like a little halo that she'd absolutely hate if she knew about it. I went to bed. I set my alarm for 7:30. I had 3 hours. I never made it to the alarm. My phone started going off at 6:04. Not one notification. Not a couple. It was like someone had thrown a rock into a wasp nest. Buzzing, chiming, lighting up. The screen strobing against the ceiling of my dark bedroom in a way that made my half-asleep brain think something had malfunctioned. I grabbed it. 17 texts. 4 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. My building supervisor, Dave, had sent me a message that just said, "Call me the second you see this. Do not go online first." Which of course meant I went online first. The photo was already everywhere. She'd posted it at 4:12 in the morning. By 6, it had been shared over 3,000 times. By the time I was sitting upright in my bed with the sheets still warm and my brain not fully caught up to my eyes, the number was climbing past 5,000. And the caption, I still remember every word of it because I read it about 11 times in a row, trying to understand if I was misreading something. She'd written, "This is what entitlement looks like. Found a maintenance worker asleep in my executive chair at 4 a.m., in my private office, on my floor. This is not okay." There was a hashtag. There was my face, completely recognizable, slightly slack-jawed from sleep in her chair under her lights. Under. I sat there in my bedroom in the gray 6 a.m. light and I felt something I'm not sure I have the right word for. It wasn't rage. Rage is hot and it moves fast. This was slower. This was the feeling of watching something you built carefully and quietly start to come apart, thread by thread, and knowing you're too far away to stop it. And then I heard it, from down the hall through the thin door of Lily's room. That sound, that low, satisfied morning hum, like a small engine warming up. And then, "Daddy?" I put the phone face down on the mattress, stood up, walked down the hall, pushed open her door. "Hey, Bug," I said. "Good morning." She sat up, blinked at me with those still half-asleep eyes, and held Captain Biscuit out toward me like an offering. "He had a bad dream," she said very seriously. "He needs a hug first." I sat on the edge of her bed and hugged that rabbit with both hands, and I held it together. I held it together because that's what you do. But something had started. Something I couldn't see the shape of yet. And as I sat there in the morning light with my daughter talking to me about her rabbit's feelings, my phone was face down on my mattress, vibrating quietly, steadily, like a second heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I didn't know yet that by the end of that day, everything was going to change. I had no idea. Dave called me at 6:18. I know the exact time because Lily was sitting across from me at the kitchen table eating toast with peanut butter. She takes exactly 4 bites before she starts pulling the crust off and setting it aside in a little pile. Every single morning, like she's performing a ritual she invented herself. And I was on my second cup of coffee when the phone lit up with his name. I'd been expecting it. Dreading it the way you dread a bill you already know you can't pay. I stepped into the hallway out of earshot. "Marcus." That was all he said at first. Just my name, in that tone that people use when they're trying to figure out how much you already know before they decide how much to tell you. "I saw it," I said. He let out a breath. Long and slow, the kind that carries weight. Dave Kowalski had been my supervisor for 6 years. He was the kind of man who wore the same style of flannel shirt in 3 different colors and kept a photo of his late wife on his desk, even though it made him sad to look at it. He'd told me that once. Almost accidentally, during a late shift. He wasn't a bad man, but he was a man inside a system, and systems have their own gravity. "Corporate already called," he said. "HR is opening a review. I tried to get ahead of it, Marcus, I want you to know that. I told them you'd been on for 42 hours. I told them about the pressure line, about the latch, all of it. They said..." He stopped. I could hear him pressing his lips together. "They said the circumstances don't change the conduct." "The conduct," I repeated. Their word, not mine. I leaned against the hallway wall. The wallpaper there is this faded beige stripe that Jennifer picked out 7 years ago, before everything fell apart, and I've always meant to replace it but somehow never got around to it. I was staring at it now like it was the most interesting thing in the world. "Am I suspended?" I asked. "Pending review, yes." "Paid?" The pause that followed that question was its own answer. "They're calling it administrative leave while the review is ongoing," he said. "Marcus, I'm sorry, I really am. If this weren't so public..." "I get it, Dave. I don't think you should have been on that long in the first place." I told them that too. I said we were short-staffed and that you were the only... "Dave," I said it quietly but firmly. I appreciate it, I do. But it's done. We said goodbye. I stood in the hallway for another minute just breathing, one hand flat against that old beige wallpaper, feeling the faint texture of it against my palm. Then I heard Lily push back her chair and call out, "Daddy, the crust is ready for the birds." We have this thing where we take her leftover toast crust to the little patch of grass behind our building and leave it for the pigeons, which she calls the bread guys. And I pushed off the wall and went back into the kitchen and said, "Let me get my shoes, Bug." And I got my shoes. Because that's the job. The other job. The one that doesn't have a supervisor or a review board or a photo on the internet. The one that just has her. We went outside and fed the bread guys. I watched Lily crouch down in the grass in her pajama pants and her little puffy vest, holding out a piece of crust to a pigeon that was approximately as large as her torso, and completely unafraid of her. She was talking to it. I couldn't hear exactly what she was saying. Something about Captain Biscuit. Something about school. But the pigeon was doing that head tilt thing they do, and she was taking it absolutely as confirmation that it understood her completely. I had my phone in my pocket. It buzzed 4 times in the 10 minutes we stood there. I didn't look at it once. When we went back upstairs, I got her set up with her Saturday morning cartoons. She's obsessed with this one show about a girl who builds robots, which honestly tracks. And I sat at the kitchen table and finally let myself actually look at what was happening online. It was worse than I thought. Not because of the numbers were just numbers. It was the comments. The way people talk about a person they've never met, with that kind of absolute confidence, that certainty. Lazy, entitled, unprofessional, should be fired. Who does he think he is? One person had written, and this one stuck in my ribs like a splinter. The audacity. These people forget their place. Their place. I put the phone down and looked at my hands. At the scar on my right hand, the one that runs from below my index finger down toward my wrist. I got it when I was 22, on a job where I wasn't supposed to be working a live circuit, but the foreman said it was fine, and I trusted him because I was 22 and didn't know yet that trusting people who benefit from your compliance is always a losing position. Took 14 stitches, never complained, never sued, just healed and went back to work. Their place. I knew my place. I'd always known my place. My place was the 42 hours. The secondary log. The pipe in the middle of the night. The latch that nobody else would have noticed. My place was the crust in the grass for the bread guys and the cartoons about robots and the morning hum from down the hall. The photo didn't change any of that, but it was trying to. Around 9:30, someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened it with the particular caution of a man who'd already had a bad morning. And standing in my hallway was my neighbor, Diana Reeves. Now look, I need to describe Diana correctly because she's important to this story, and she deserves to be described right. She was 41, about 5'4", with natural hair that she usually kept pulled back but on weekends let go completely. And it came out to here, this full, incredible cloud of dark spirals that made her look like a person who had genuinely stopped caring what the world thought of her personal choices. In the best possible way. She wore glasses with tortoiseshell frames that were slightly too large for her face, which should have looked wrong, but somehow made her look like the smartest person in any room, which she usually was. She'd moved in next door 2 years ago with a box of law books, a coffee maker that sounded like a small aircraft, and the most functional tool organization system I'd ever seen in a residential space. She'd shown me once, during a conversation about a leaky faucet she needed help with. Color-coded, labeled. The woman was not playing around. She was a labor attorney. I hadn't put that together yet. Not fully. I was still in survival mode. Still running on bad coffee and the residual warmth of watching Lily talk to a pigeon. "I saw the post," she said. No preamble. No how are you. Just that. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She came in and stood in my kitchen with her arms crossed, looking at me with an expression I couldn't fully read at first. Something between professional assessment and genuine concern. The way a doctor looks at an X-ray they're not happy about. She'd clearly come over directly from her own morning. She was in a sweatshirt and jeans, no jacket. and she was holding her phone loosely at her side. "How long had you been on shift?" she asked. 42 hours. Something moved across her face. Not surprise, more like confirmation of something she'd already suspected. "Did you have documentation of that? Time logs, sign-in sheets, anything?" "Service reports, secondary cabinet log. The pressure line job has a full work order with timestamps." She nodded slowly. "Did you touch anything in that office besides the chair?" "The door. To check the latch. I documented the latch issue in the log." "So you entered to perform maintenance?" "I entered to document a maintenance issue I identified." She looked at me for a moment in that way she had, like she was reading something printed very small on the inside of your forehead. Then she said, "Marcus, she posted that photo without your consent. In most states, that's actionable, especially combined with the circumstances, the length of shift, the documented maintenance task, the fact that you self-reported before security even reached you." She paused. "Did you self-report?" I told her I was leaving and noted the latch issue in the secondary log before security arrived. "Out loud?" "You said it to her?" "Clearly." She exhaled. It was a specific kind of exhale, the kind that means the pieces are fitting together in a way that matters. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway right at that moment, because children have a radar for adult conversations and an instinct to interrupt them at peak tension. She was holding Captain Biscuit by the ear, the short ear, and looking at Diana with the frank, evaluative stare that only 6-year-olds can pull off without being rude. "Hi," she said. "Hi," said Diana, and her whole face changed, softened. "Is that rabbit's name Captain something?" Lily's eyes went wide. "Captain Biscuit, how did you know?" "I can just tell," Diana said. "He looks like a captain." Lily considered this very seriously. Then she nodded. "He is," she confirmed. "He's very brave." Diana looked at me over Lily's head, and something passed between us in that look. Something that wasn't romantic. Not then. Not even close. But was the specific warmth of two adults who are both, in their own way, trying to hold something together and have just recognized that quality in each other. "I'm going to make some calls," she said to me. "Don't post anything. Don't respond to anything online. Don't talk to HR without representation." "Can you do that?" "Yeah," I said. "Good." She left, and I stood in my kitchen with my daughter and her brave rabbit, and for the first time since 6 in the morning, the dread in my chest had shifted just slightly, not gone, not even close to gone, but moved over just enough to make room for something else. Something that felt, cautiously, like it might eventually become useful. I didn't go online again until Lily went down for her afternoon rest. When I did, I found something I hadn't expected. The comments had shifted. Not all of them. There were still plenty of people who'd already made up their minds about me based on a photograph and a caption, and their need to have a clean, simple story to be outraged about. But underneath that layer, something else was happening. People who actually knew how building maintenance worked had started showing up in the thread. Former technicians, union workers, people who'd done overnight shifts in commercial buildings and recognized exactly what they were looking at. "That man has been in a uniform for at least 30 hours based on the wear patterns." Source: "I've been that man." 41 floors. Secondary log return. That's a documented maintenance task. She posted a photo of a man doing his job. The door was open. The latch was worn. He's literally a maintenance worker in a maintenance situation. What exactly is the allegation here? And then, and this is the one that made me stop scrolling completely, someone had posted a response that said, "Does anyone else think it's worth looking into whether Victoria Hale has done this kind of thing before? Because I'm a former Hale Tower employee, and this is not the first time she's made someone an example publicly. I've been waiting for someone to say something." The account was small, only a few hundred followers, but the comment had 47 replies. I screenshotted it. I didn't know why yet. I just did. Then I closed the app, put the phone on the counter, went to check on Lily. She was asleep on her side with one arm thrown over Captain Biscuit and her mouth slightly open, and her brows furrowed together in the specific expression she makes when she's deeply, seriously dreaming. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment. The afternoon light came through the curtain sideways, soft and yellowish, and caught the edge of her hair. I made a decision in that doorway, not dramatically, not with any kind of moment of thunder or clarity, just quietly, the way men make the decisions that matter, while watching their kids sleep and understanding exactly what's worth fighting for. I was going to find out what I was actually dealing with, not because I wanted to fight, not because I was angry, though I was, but because something in that comment thread, that small, specific comment from that small, quiet account, had snagged on something I already knew in my gut and hadn't let myself examine yet. That night at the 41st floor hadn't been random. The latch, the door, the cabinet, the chair, and something else, something I hadn't mentioned to Diana yet. Something I'd been carrying since the moment I woke up in that chair and heard Victoria Hale's voice on the phone. Something I'd heard before I was fully awake. A detail so small and so specific that I almost hadn't caught it. Almost. I went back to the kitchen and picked up my phone, opened my contacts, scrolled to a name I hadn't called in 3 years. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and started thinking about everything I remembered from that night. Every word, every name, every number. Let me tell you something about memory. Most people think memory works like a camera, like your brain just takes a picture of something and stores it, and then you go back and look at the picture later. But that's not how it works. Not really. Memory is more like, okay, you know how when you're fixing a pipe in the dark and you can't see what your hands are doing, so every other sense gets louder? You start feeling the threads of the fitting more carefully. You hear the pitch of the water pressure change. You smell the difference between clean copper and corroded copper. Your whole body becomes the instrument because your eyes aren't available. That's how I process things when I'm exhausted. My vision narrows, my hearing doesn't. If anything, it sharpens. 11 years of maintenance work in buildings where half the job is listening. Listening to walls, to pressure lines, to the specific frequency of a motor that's 2 weeks away from failing. That kind of work rewires something in you. You stop filtering sound the way normal people do. You start catching things that were never meant for you. Which is why, when I woke up in that chair on the 41st floor, the first thing that registered wasn't the light. It wasn't Victoria Hale's face or her voice or the sound of the camera shutter. It was the tail end of a conversation that was already in progress. She hadn't just walked in and turned on the lights. She'd been in the room for at least 30 seconds before she hit that switch. I know this because I came up slowly, the way you do after deep exhaustion, and there were words already hanging in the air around me before I was conscious enough to understand them as words. My brain was recording before my eyes were open. It does that. It always has. What I heard was this. A man's voice on her phone. Speakerphone. Low volume, but I was close enough. 2 words, clear as anything. Already confirmed. And then Victoria's voice, tight and controlled. Then we move Thursday. That was it. That was all I caught before the lights came on and the world went white, and I was standing up with my toolbox in my hand. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. A business call. A woman running a $2 billion company at 4 in the morning probably has 100 conversations that sound vague and slightly ominous taken out of context. I filed it away in that specific drawer in my head, where I put things that don't have a category yet. And I went home, and I fed the bread guys, and I sat in my daughter's doorway and made a quiet decision. But the name. See, that's the thing I hadn't let myself think about yet. Because before those 2 sentences, before already confirmed and moved Thursday, I'd caught something else. Something earlier. While I was still deep under, while the words were just sounds that hadn't become language yet. A name. I'd heard it the way you hear something in a dream that you almost lose when you wake up. That fragile, smoke-on-glass quality of a detail that almost didn't make it out. But it did make it out. It was there, sitting in the back of my head like a splinter I hadn't looked at yet. The name was Garrett. Garrett Briggs. I hadn't said that name out loud in 3 years. I hadn't needed to. He existed in my life the way a bad structural repair exists in a building, hidden inside the walls, not visible, but slowly, steadily, doing damage that compounds over time. He was Jennifer's attorney. He'd been Jennifer's attorney since the beginning of the custody arrangement, which meant he'd been my problem since Lily was 2 years old. And I want to be clear about something. I'm not the kind of man who assumes the worst about people. I've worked alongside enough folks to know that most people are just trying to do their jobs and go home, same as me. But Garrett Briggs was a specific kind of person, the kind who uses systems the way a lockpick uses tumblers, not breaking anything technically, just applying pressure to exactly the right points until something opens that shouldn't. He was 48 years old and looked like a man who'd decided at some point in his 30s that his entire identity would be the suit he was wearing, not in a powerful way, in a compensating way. Everything about him was just slightly too polished. The hair, the watch, the way he held his pen during depositions like it was a prop in a performance he'd rehearsed. He had this particular smile that never reached higher than his mouth, the kind of smile that says, "I know something you don't," even when he almost certainly didn't. He'd filed 3 motions against me in 18 months on Jennifer's behalf. 2 were dismissed. 1 resulted in a temporary modification of the custody schedule that cost me 6 weeks with Lily, and about $4,000 in legal fees I paid by picking up double shifts for 2 months straight. I never found a single thing that technically wrong with anything he did. That was the point. It was all technically fine, technically within the rules. Just like a corroded valve is technically still a valve until the day it isn't. And now his name was in my head, attached to a phone call I'd half heard in a room I wasn't supposed to be in, connected to a woman who'd just put my face on the internet. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew it meant something. The person I called was a guy named Troy Watts. We'd worked together 8 years ago at a commercial property management company that no longer exists, and we'd stayed loosely in touch the way men do when they respect each other, but don't need to prove it with regular contact. Troy was one of those people who just knew things, not because he was nosy, but because he genuinely understood how systems worked, and systems talk to people who know how to listen. He'd transitioned out of maintenance about 4 years ago, and was now doing private building inspections and compliance consulting, which meant he had his fingers in a lot of pies and his ear to a lot of walls. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Marcus Reed," he said, like my name was mildly surprising but not unwelcome. "I was wondering when you were going to call." "You saw it," I said. "Man, half the city saw it. How you holding up?" "I'm okay." "Lily's good. Listen." I paused, choosing the next part carefully. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to think about whether you can answer it before you answer it." There was a short silence. Troy understood that sentence. He'd heard versions of it before. "Go ahead," he said. "Does the name Garrett Briggs mean anything to you in connection with Hale Tower or Victoria Hale's company?" Another silence. Longer this time. The kind of silence that means the question landed somewhere specific. "Why are you asking me that?" he said. Not defensive. Careful. "Because I heard his name in a context I didn't expect. And then this morning happened. And I'm trying to figure out if those 2 things are a coincidence." Troy was quiet for a moment. I could hear him breathing, hear the distant sound of something, a TV maybe or a radio, in the background of wherever he was. Then he said, "I'm not going to answer that on the phone. You free tomorrow? I'm suspended without pay and my daughter has soccer at 9. After that, yeah. There's a diner on Clement. The one with the green awning. Noon. I'll be there. And Marcus?" He paused. "Don't talk to anyone from Hale's legal team without your own person in the room. I mean that." "Already handled," I said, thinking of Diana and her tortoiseshell glasses and her color-coded tool organization. "Good," he hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a while after that, not doing anything in particular, just letting things settle into their proper shapes. Outside the window, the afternoon light was going that particular gold that means the day is thinking about ending. Inside, I could hear the faint cartoon music from the living room where Lily had apparently woken up from her rest and restarted her show without coming to get me, which she does sometimes when she's in a very independent mood and wants me to know it. I thought about the 41st floor, the latch, the chair, the tail end of that phone call. I thought about Garrett Briggs and his prop pen, and his 3 motions in 18 months and the 6 weeks I'd lost with Lily, that I would never get back. I thought about Victoria Hale posting that photo at 4:12 in the morning, and the caption she'd chosen and the specific word she'd used, entitlement, which struck me, even then, as a strange word for a woman in her position to use, like someone who'd learned irony as a concept but not as a practice. And then I thought about something Diana had said. Does anyone else think it's worth looking into whether Victoria Hale has done this kind of thing before? No. Wait. That wasn't Diana. That was the comment. The small account. The comment with 47 replies. I picked up my phone, opened the post again, opened, scrolled down until I found it. The account was called NTE Structural. The bio said, Building and Infrastructure, NYCSF, opinions my own. I read through the replies more carefully this time. Most of them were people agreeing, sharing their own vague experiences, the usual thread energy. But 3 or 4 of them were more specific. One in particular, from an account with no profile picture, just a gray silhouette, said, I reported a safety issue at HT 2 years ago. I was let go within the month. They said it was restructuring. It wasn't. HT Hale Tower. I took a screenshot. I took a screenshot of every specific comment in that thread. Then I went to NT Structural's profile and looked at their posts. Nothing personal. Mostly technical stuff, building codes, inspection reports, the occasional sharp comment about commercial property management practices. But there was one post from about 8 months ago, a photograph of a document, partially obscured. Like someone had photographed it quickly without full setup, with a caption that said, When the inspection report and the public filing tell 2 different stories, that's not an error. That's a choice. I couldn't read the document clearly enough to make out specific details, but I could see the letterhead. Hale Property Group. My heart did something specific in my chest at that moment. Not racing, not pounding, just a single heavy thud, like a door closing on something, like a piece fitting into a place it was always meant to go. I thought about what Diana had asked me, about whether I'd documented the latch, about the secondary log, about the timestamps on my service reports. I thought about the pressure line on floors 14 through 17, about the fact that if I hadn't fixed it that night, if I'd handed it off to the morning crew the way I probably should have given the hours I'd been on, based on the rate of pressure loss I'd calculated, the system would have had maybe another 36 hours before something gave, maybe 48. The building would have been at half capacity Monday morning, maybe full capacity. A pressure failure in a commercial high-rise with full occupancy is not a small thing. I knew exactly what it could mean. I'd seen the results of deferred maintenance in buildings where the people making the decisions never had to live with the consequences. I'd seen the lawsuits afterward. I'd seen the reports. I'd fixed it. Quietly. At 2 in the morning. Without anyone asking. Because that's what I did. And then I'd been photographed sleeping in a chair. I made dinner that night the way I always make dinner when my brain is working overtime on something I can't talk about yet. I made too much of it. Full pasta with a sauce that takes 40 minutes, garlic bread, the salad that Lily only eats if I cut the cucumbers into small enough pieces and call them green coins. It's a thing we have. She sat at the table with her feet swinging, because she's not quite tall enough for them to reach the floor yet, and told me about the episode she'd watched. The robot girl had to fix a bridge using only material she found nearby, and Lily had a lot of opinions about the engineering choices, and I listened. Actually listened. Not just the surface-level parental MMHM, but actually following the thread of it, because she is genuinely funny and her logic is its own complete system, and I was grateful for it in a way I couldn't have explained. After dinner, after bath, after Captain Biscuit had been located under the bed where he'd apparently gone exploring, after the lights were out and the door was open exactly the 4-inch gap she requires, not 3, not 5, exactly 4, I went back to the kitchen and sat with a cup of coffee that went cold before I drank half of it. Diana had texted while I was doing bedtime, spoke to 2 colleagues today. You have options. Don't make any decisions tonight. Sleep. I texted back. Working on it. Thank you. She sent back a single thumbs up and then, after a second text. How's the rabbit? I smiled at my phone in my empty kitchen in a way that surprised me a little. Brave, I wrote back. Very brave. I went to bed at 10:30. For the first time in 3 days, I actually slept, and while I slept, something was happening that I wouldn't find out about until morning. Something small and specific that had started with a comment on a photo and a gray silhouette account and 47 replies, and was now moving through the internet the way a pressure differential moves through a pipe system. Quietly, invisibly, building toward something. The morning was going to be different. I just didn't know how different yet. Sunday morning came in through the curtains like it had somewhere to be. I don't know how else to describe it. There was something different about that light. It wasn't softer or harder than usual. It was just present in a way that felt deliberate, like the day had already decided something without consulting me. I lay there for about 30 seconds in that specific state of consciousness where you know you're awake but your body hasn't committed to it yet, and I listened to the building. Old habit. You spend enough years maintaining structures and you start reading them the way some people read weather, by feel, by the small sounds, by the quality of the silence between them. The building was quiet. Lily wasn't up yet. Somewhere down the hall, the radiator made the small ticking sound it makes when the morning temperature drops faster than the thermostat expects. I'd been meaning to recalibrate it for 2 weeks. My phone was on the nightstand face down exactly where I'd left it. I looked at it for about 10 seconds before I picked it up. 17 missed notifications. But that wasn't what stopped me. What stopped me was the text from a number I didn't recognize. No name. No area code I knew offhand. Just a message, sent at 2:47 in the morning, that said, "You don't know me. My name is Natalie. I'm the one who posted the comment about the safety report. I think we need to talk. I know what was in that building, and I know why Garrett Briggs was on that call." I read it 4 times. Then I sat up completely, both feet on the floor, the way you sit when something shifts from background concern to foreground reality. The radiator ticked. Outside, a pigeon landed on the windowsill, looked in through the glass with that flat prehistoric stare they have, and then left. I barely registered it. I typed back, "How did you get this number?" The response came in under a minute, which told me she'd been awake or at least close to her phone. "Troy Watts. He said you were trustworthy. I've been waiting 2 years to say something to someone trustworthy." Troy. Of course. I wrote, "I'm meeting him today at noon. Can you be there?" A pause. Longer this time. Long enough that I put the phone down, stood up, went to the kitchen, started the coffee. Came back. Still no response. I went and checked on Lily. Still asleep, one arm around Captain Biscuit, mouth slightly open, completely horizontal in a way that suggested she'd relocated significantly since bedtime. Came back to the kitchen. The response was there. "Yes, but I want you to understand something first. What I have, what I've been sitting on, it's not just about you. It's not just about the photo. If this goes where I think it can go, it's going to be a much bigger thing than a viral post. I need to know you understand that before we sit down together." I looked at that message for a long moment. At the window, the morning light was doing that thing where it catches the dust in the air and makes it visible. All these tiny particles just floating, present all the time but usually invisible, only revealed when the angle is right. I typed, "I'm a maintenance technician. I spent 11 years fixing things that people didn't notice were broken. I understand, bigger than it looks." Another pause. Then, noon. "I'll be the one with the red folder. Soccer was at 9. I want to tell you about soccer because it matters. Not in a plot way, not in a this is going to be relevant later way, but in the way that the things that keep you human always matter when everything else is trying to make you into a symbol or a headline or a situation to be managed. Lily plays on a team called the Lightning Bolts, which is an extremely ambitious name for 7 6-year-olds who spend approximately 40% of each game looking at clouds. She plays left defense, which in under 7 soccer means she runs in the general direction of the ball whenever it comes near her, and occasionally makes contact with it by accident. She takes it very seriously. She owns cleats that she insisted on picking herself. They are iridescent, somewhere between purple and blue depending on the light, and she refers to them as her fast shoes. She is not fast. She is determined, which is better. I stood on the sideline in the Sunday morning cold with a thermos of coffee and watched my daughter chase a soccer ball across a muddy field with the total commitment of someone who believes completely in what they're doing. And I felt something settle in my chest that I don't have a clean word for. Gratitude, maybe, but sharper than that, more specific. The feeling of knowing exactly what you're protecting and why, with a clarity that cuts through everything else. The other parents on the sideline were the usual mix. Weekend dads with their hands in their pockets, moms with travel mugs, a few grandparents who'd been recruited. Nobody said anything to me about the photo. Either they hadn't seen it, which was possible, or they had and they were being politely quiet about it, which was also possible, or they'd seen it and already moved on to the next thing, which was the most likely. Because that's how these things work. The internet has a long memory, but people have short ones. One dad, a guy named Pete whose son plays goalie, came and stood next to me about 20 minutes in. He's one of those guys who's just fundamentally decent in a quiet way. He always brings extra orange slices on snack day even when it's not his turn. And he once helped me jumpstart my truck in the parking lot after a game without being asked. He stood next to me for a while without saying anything, and then he said, "Saw that stuff online. You doing all right?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm all right." "Figured," he said. And that was it. He went back to watching the game. I want to remember that moment. That exact, specific, unspectacular moment of a decent person asking one question and then not making it weird. I want to remember it because the next few hours were going to be a lot of things, but they were not going to be that. I dropped Lily at Mrs. Patterson's at 11:15. Mrs. Patterson was already at the door when we pulled up. She has this sixth sense about timing that I've never been able to explain. Holding the door open with one hand and a butterscotch candy already visible in the other. Lily registered the candy from approximately 15 feet away and accelerated accordingly. "Back by 4?" Mrs. Patterson asked me over Lily's head. "By 3, I said. "If anything changes, I'll call." She nodded in the way she always does, like she's already accounted for 3 different variations of this scenario and is comfortable with all of them. Then she said, quietly enough that Lily wouldn't hear, "I saw the news, Marcus. That woman ought to be ashamed of herself." I didn't say anything to that. I just nodded. But it landed somewhere soft, the way unexpected kindness always does, right in that spot behind your sternum that you forget about until someone reaches it. The diner on Clement had green awnings and a handwritten specials board, and smelled like coffee and something with maple syrup. It was the kind of place that's been exactly the same for 30 years and is proud of it. The kind of place where the booths are slightly sticky and the mugs are slightly chipped and nobody apologizes for either. Troy was already there when I walked in. He'd taken a corner booth back to the wall, facing the door, which told me this conversation was already the kind of conversation where you sit with your back to the wall. He looked exactly like he always looked. Big shoulders, close-cropped hair going gray at the temples, work-worn hands wrapped around a mug. He had the specific physical presence of a man who has moved heavy things for a long time and decided not to apologize for the space he takes up. He stood when he saw me, not for any formal reason, just the way some men do when someone they respect walks in. We shook hands. I sat across from him. "She's already here," he said, tilting his head slightly toward the back of the diner. I turned and looked. Natalie Okafor was sitting at a small table near the back. Alone, with a cup of tea and a red folder on the table in front of her. Exactly as promised. She was 38, maybe 40, with a stillness about her that reminded me of people who have been through something significant and come out the other side with most of themselves intact. She had close-cropped natural hair and sharp, observant eyes behind small oval glasses, and she was wearing a dark green jacket that looked like it had been through a lot of weather. She wasn't nervous, or if she was, she'd organized it into something that looked like patience. The red folder was thick. I walked over, She looked up. We looked at each other for a moment with the specific assessment of two people who've both done their research but are meeting the subject of that research for the first time. Marcus, she said. Not a question. Natalie, I said. I sat down. Troy came and pulled a chair up to the end of the small table, and then the waitress came, and I ordered coffee, and then we all sat with our drinks for a moment in the particular silence that precedes a conversation that matters. Natalie put her hand flat on the red folder, not opening it yet, just acknowledging it. I was a structural engineer, she said. I worked in commercial compliance consulting for 11 years. 2 years ago, I was contracted to do an independent inspection of Hale Tower. She paused. Have you ever heard of a document called an infrastructure shadow report? No, I said. Most people haven't. It's not an official term. It's what contractors sometimes call an internal pre-inspection report, the one that happens before the official filing. The one that tells you what the building actually looks like before the lawyers decide what the official record is going to say. Her voice was completely even. Factual. The voice of someone who has rehearsed this moment but isn't performing it. I filed my shadow report in March 2 years ago. It identified 14 significant concerns in Hale Tower's infrastructure. 3 of them were what I would classify as requiring immediate remediation. One of them, she stopped, opened the folder, slid a single page across the table toward me. One of them was the hydraulic pressure system on floors 14 through 17. I looked at the page. I'm not going to pretend I was calm. My eyes went straight to the section heading. Pressure differential anomaly, floors 14 to 17. Risk classification, high. Recommended action, immediate. The report was dated 26 months ago. I thought about Thursday night, about the pressure line, about the 2 younger technicians who couldn't crack it, about the service report I filed with my small, careful handwriting. They buried it, I said. It wasn't a question. The official inspection filing submitted to the city 3 weeks later identified 2 minor concerns, both low priority, both since resolved. She said it like she was reading from a document, even though she wasn't. She'd clearly said this sentence in her head many times. My shadow report was not referenced. My contract was not renewed. I was told the project scope had changed. Within 6 weeks, I had lost 2 other clients in the same network, both with connections to Hale Property Group. She came after your work, Troy said. Not dramatically, just stating it. Systematically, Natalie said. Yes. She took a breath. I kept everything. Every document, every email, every version of every report. I kept it because I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew I needed to have it. And then 2 years passed, and nothing happened, and I started to think maybe nothing would. And then Saturday morning I saw a photograph of a man in a maintenance uniform being publicly humiliated for falling asleep in a chair after what was clearly an extended shift. She looked at me directly. In a building with a pressure system that should have been overhauled before you ever set foot in it. The diner was doing its quiet Sunday business around us, the clink of silverware, the murmur of other conversations, the soft bell over the door every time someone came in or left. Completely ordinary. Completely ordinary world happening 6 feet away from what felt in that corner booth, like the first real breath of something. Tell me about Garrett Briggs, I said. Something shifted in Natalie's expression. Subtle but real. The specific look of someone who has been waiting for a particular question and is still slightly unsettled that it arrived. How do you know that name in this context? She asked carefully. I heard it, I said. The night of the photo, in the office, before I was fully awake. I heard his name, and 2 other things, already confirmed and moved Thursday. I paused. I didn't know what it meant then, I do now. Natalie and Troy exchanged a look. The kind of look that means something just confirmed something. Garrett Briggs has done legal work for Hale Property Group for 4 years, Natalie said slowly. He's not listed as outside counsel anywhere public. It's done through a shell arrangement, a small firm that operates as a subsidiary of a larger one. But his name is in 3 of the internal documents I have, always in the context of decisions about what gets reported and what doesn't, what gets filed, and what gets buried. The air in the diner felt different suddenly. Or maybe it was just the air in my lungs. The specific density of a breath you take when something you suspected becomes something you know. He's also Jennifer's attorney, I said quietly. My ex. In the custody arrangement. The silence that followed that sentence was 3 full seconds long. Troy set down his mug. Natalie looked at me with those sharp, observant eyes, and I watched her connect something. I watched the shape of it change on her face. Marcus, she said carefully. The custody modification motion that was filed against you 18 months ago. Was that around the same time the pressure system issues started showing up in your maintenance logs? I thought about it. Actually thought about it. Went back through the timeline in my head the way I go through a maintenance history, methodically looking for the pattern. Yeah, I said slowly. Yeah, it was. And who would have had access to your maintenance logs in that window? Building management, supervisors, the compliance office. I stopped. And any contracted legal entity conducting a building review. The 3 of us sat with that for a moment. Outside the diner window, the Sunday morning was doing its ordinary things. People walking dogs, a kid on a bike, a woman carrying groceries. The completely normal world going about its business, with no idea that in a corner booth of a diner with green awnings, 3 people were sitting with a red folder and a very specific kind of quiet fury. Starting to see the shape of something that had been operating in the walls for a long time. I want to show you the rest of what I have, Natalie said. She opened the folder all the way. We were there for 2 hours and 40 minutes. I ordered 3 cups of coffee. I ate nothing. Troy ordered eggs that went cold while he was reading. Natalie walked us through every document with the systematic precision of someone who'd been organizing this presentation in her head for 2 years. Not frantically, not triumphantly, just carefully and completely, the way you show someone something important. By the time we were done, the lunch crowd had come and mostly gone. The diner had settled back into its mid-afternoon quiet. My 3rd coffee cup was empty. My notepad, I'd started writing about 40 minutes in, my small, careful handwriting filling the pages, had 9 pages of notes. What do we do with this? Troy asked. Natalie folded her hands on top of the closed folder. That depends on what Marcus wants, she said, because he's the one whose face is on the internet. He's the one with the most to gain or lose from how this goes. She looked at me. I've been sitting on this for 2 years. I can keep sitting on it. But you have something I didn't have. What's that? I asked. You have a reason for people to pay attention right now, she said. You have a face that 300,000 people have already seen. And you have a story that connects the photo to what's underneath it. She paused. The photo is the surface. What I have is what's underneath. I thought about Lily. About 6 weeks I'd lost. About the motions and the legal fees and the double shifts. About the latch on the 41st floor that had been wearing down for months and nobody had reported. About the pressure line that I'd fixed in the middle of the night while Victoria Hale was in Singapore, closing a deal that her board said was impossible. About what it means to fix things in the dark that people don't notice until they break. I have a lawyer, I said. A good one. She's going to want to see all of this. Natalie nodded. I assumed. She slid the red folder across the table to me. These are copies. I have the originals secured. She looked at me steadily. I've been waiting for someone who could actually use this, Marcus. I'm glad it turned out to be someone with something worth protecting. I put my hand on the folder. It was heavier than it looked. I picked up Lily at 3 on the dot. She came to the door with butterscotch on her breath and a drawing she'd made for me and her and Captain Biscuit standing in front of what appeared to be our building, drawn in crayon with the specific artistic confidence of someone who doesn't know yet that perspective is a thing. She'd given me enormous hands. I asked her why, and she said, "Because you fix things with them, Daddy," and then ran back inside to get her jacket. I stood in Mrs. Patterson's doorway holding a crayon drawing with enormous hands. Mrs. Patterson looked at me from across her hallway. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once, the way women of a certain wisdom nod when they see a man who's about to step into something he's ready for, even if he doesn't know it yet. I drove home with Lily in the back seat talking to Captain Biscuit about what the bread guys had probably done that day while we were busy. The red folder was on the passenger seat. I had a lawyer. I had a structural engineer with 2 years of buried documents and nothing left to lose. I had a maintenance record that said exactly what I'd been doing in that building and for how long. And I had something else, something I was only beginning to understand the weight of. I had the truth. And the truth, like a pressure line, like a worn latch, like a circuit carrying too much load for too long. The truth had a way of eventually finding its way out. Even in buildings where people paid very good money to keep things buried, I just had to be patient a little longer. Monday morning arrived the way Mondays do when your life has become something you don't fully recognize yet. Quietly, without ceremony, with the particular indifference of a day that doesn't know or care that everything shifted over the weekend. I made Lily's lunch at 6:50, turkey and cheese, crusts cut off, green coins on the side in their own small container because she doesn't like them touching the sandwich. A note in the front pocket of her backpack. I always put a note in there, nothing fancy, just something small. That morning I drew a rabbit with one short ear and wrote Captain Biscuit says you're going to have a great day. I folded it twice and slid it in next to her library book. She came into the kitchen still pulling her hair into a ponytail, which she does herself now and is extremely proud of, even though there are always approximately 4 strands going in the wrong direction that she refuses to acknowledge. She sat down, looked at her plate, picked up a green coin, examined it, and said, "These are perfect," with the gravity of a food critic issuing a final verdict. "Glad to hear it," I said. I drove her to school, watched her go through the front doors with her backpack bouncing and her iridescent fast shoes catching the morning light. Watched until the door closed behind her. Then I sat in the pickup line for an extra minute before pulling out, just breathing. Diana was already at my kitchen table when I got back. I'd given her a key 2 months ago when I had a scheduling conflict and needed someone to let a plumber in. She'd offered and I'd taken her up on it, and neither of us had thought much about it since. Finding her at my table with her laptop open and 2 fresh cups of coffee from the place down the block felt natural in a way that would have surprised me if I'd had the bandwidth to think about it. She looked up when I came in. "Sit down," she said. Not unkindly, just... She had the folder open on the table in front of her. I'd texted her Sunday evening, told her about Natalie, told her I had documents. She'd responded with, "I'm coming over Monday morning. Don't touch anything." I sat down, took the coffee. "Okay," she said, "I've been through most of this." She had her glasses on, and she had that expression she gets when she's reading something that confirms what she already suspected. Not satisfied exactly. More like the grim, precise recognition of someone who's seen this pattern before. "This is significant, Marcus." "I know." "No, I mean legally significant. What Natalie has here isn't just a suppressed report. There are internal communications in here that reference the suppression explicitly. Someone, and based on the document chain, it looks like someone in Hale Property Group's compliance office, specifically requested that 3 of the 14 findings be removed from the official filing. In writing." She tapped a page near the top of the stack. "In writing, Marcus. That's not negligence, that's not oversight, that's a decision." I looked at the page she was tapping. The email chain was formatted the way internal emails always are. Slightly ugly, time-stamped, the kind of communication that people send without thinking about how it'll look later, because they don't plan on anyone looking at it. The relevant line was halfway down the 3rd email. "The pressure differential findings on 1417 need to come out of the public filing. G has confirmed this is manageable from a liability standpoint. Proceed accordingly." G. "Garrett," I said. "Almost certainly. His name appears 3 times in these documents in contexts that place him inside the decision-making chain about what gets reported and what doesn't." Diana took her glasses off and set them on the table. She did that when she was about to say something she'd thought through carefully. "Here's where we are. You have a wrongful termination situation, assuming they let you go, which based on the way they've framed the administrative leave, they almost certainly will. You have an unconsented photograph taken in a private context and published to a large audience in a way that caused professional and economic harm. Those are your direct claims." "Okay," I said. "But underneath those, you potentially have something else. If Garrett Briggs was acting as legal counsel to Hale Property Group at the same time he was filing motions against you in your custody proceeding, and if those motions were in any way informed by information he accessed through his role in the building review, she stopped. Let the sentence sit there incomplete for a moment. That's not just a conflict of interest, that's a potential ethics violation that could get him disbarred. And depending on the nature of what was shared, it could be worse than that. The kitchen was very quiet. The radiator ticked. Somewhere outside, a delivery truck backed up with its warning beep. You think he was using information from my maintenance logs to help Jennifer's case, I said. It came out flat. Not a question. I think it's possible. The timeline alignment you identified, the custody modification motion appearing around the same time the pressure system issues were being flagged in your logs, that could be coincidence. She picked up her glasses again, put them back on. But I've been a labor attorney for 14 years and I've learned to be very suspicious of coincidences that benefit the same parties twice. I thought about the custody modification, about what the filing had argued specifically, that my work schedule made me an inconsistent presence in Lily's life, that my extended shifts demonstrated an inability to prioritize stable childcare. At the time, it had made me angrier than I knew what to do with, because it took something I did for Lily, worked the extra shifts, covered the weekends, did the 42 hours, and reframed it as evidence against me. Turned my sacrifice into my liability. Someone had needed specific information to make that argument effectively, not general information. Specific information about specific shifts, specific dates and durations, my service logs. Diana, I said, how do we find out if he accessed those logs? Carefully, she said. And not alone. She closed the folder. I made 2 calls yesterday afternoon after you texted me. One to a colleague who handles professional conduct complaints. She specializes in attorney ethics violations. One to a former client who now works in investigative journalism. Consumer protection angle. Infrastructure safety, that sort of thing. She looked at me steadily. I want to be clear about something. I'm telling you about these calls because you deserve to know what's in motion. But this is your call to make. All of it. If you want to keep this contained to the employment claim and the photo, if that's what you decide is right for you and for Lily, I will support that fully, and we'll build the strongest case we can on those issues alone. She stopped. Made sure I heard that part. But if you want to go further, she said quietly, I think we have something real. The morning light was coming through the kitchen window at a low angle, the same angle that had caught the dust particles on Sunday, making the invisible visible. I looked at my hands on the table. The scar on my right hand, the work in the knuckles. I thought about the pressure line on floors 14 through 17, about the fact that there had been a report, a real report, a correct report, a report with proper risk classifications and recommended actions, sitting in Natalie's files for 26 months while the system in that building continued to degrade. I'd fixed it. 42 hours in at 2 in the morning because that's what I did. But I shouldn't have had to fix it at midnight during an emergency. Someone should have fixed it 24 months ago during business hours because an engineer had correctly identified it and filed the right paperwork and trusted that the system worked. The system hadn't worked, and then the system had gone after Natalie. And then, through a chain of connections that was becoming harder and harder to see as coincidental, it had come for me, my job, my logs, my custody arrangement, my daughter's 6 weeks. I looked at Diana. Let's go further, I said. She nodded. Once. Didn't smile. This wasn't a smiling moment, and she knew it. She just opened her laptop and started typing. Troy called at 10:15. I spoke to someone this morning, he said. Former building inspector. Works independent now. He's willing to look at Natalie's shadow report and give a formal professional opinion on the divergence between her findings and the official filing. A pause. He's not cheap. How much? He told me. I did the math in my head against my savings, against the suspended pay, against the $1,200 I still owed from the last custody motion. Okay, I said. Marcus. It's okay, Troy. A short silence. Then, this guy's opinion, if it's what we think it'll be. is the kind of thing that regulatory bodies care about, the kind of thing that building safety offices care about, the kind of thing that, if it gets in front of the right people, creates a paper trail that's very hard to make disappear. When can he start? I told him Tuesday. Tell him Monday, I said. Tell him today if he's available. Troy exhaled, not surprised, just confirming something. I'll call him back, he said. The other thing that happened Monday was something I hadn't anticipated and couldn't have engineered. At 2:14 in the afternoon, while I was at my kitchen table going through service records and Diana was on a call in the living room, my phone buzzed with a notification from a news alert I'd set up years ago for Hale Tower, part of a professional habit of tracking buildings I worked in case of anything relevant. The alert was for an article published 40 minutes earlier in a mid-size local news outlet. The headline was, "Viral photo raises questions about Hale Tower maintenance culture." I opened it. The reporter, a woman named Sarah Okonkwo, whose byline I didn't recognize, had done something interesting. She hadn't just written about the photo. She'd written about the building. She'd pulled public maintenance records. She'd noted the gap between inspection cycles. She'd quoted anonymously a former contracted engineer who expressed concerns about the accuracy of Hale Tower's most recent public infrastructure filing. Natalie, anonymously, already. The article wasn't explosive, it was careful, measured, the kind of piece a good journalist writes when they have something real, but need more before they go bigger. But it asked the right questions. And at the bottom, in the last paragraph, it said, "The maintenance worker depicted in the photo, who has not been publicly identified by name, was reportedly on an extended shift when the photograph was taken. Questions about working conditions and reporting procedures at Hale Tower have not yet been addressed by the company." I read that last paragraph 3 times. Then I called the number Diana had given me, her journalist contact. "I know," the woman said when she picked up and I started to explain. "I already saw the piece. That's not my work. That's someone else on the beat. Which means the story is moving faster than we planned." A pause. "Marcus, I think we need to move our timeline up. How do you feel about talking to me this week? On the record, but strategic about what we say and when." I looked around my kitchen. The crayon drawing with the enormous hands was on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a sunflower that Lily had picked out at a farmer's market. Captain Biscuit was on the counter because Lily had decided he needed to watch things while she was at school. "Tell me what strategic looks like," I said. She told me. It was smart. It was careful. It centered the safety issue, the real issue, the pressure line, the shadow report, the 26 months, without prematurely exposing Natalie's documents before the professional review was complete. It gave me a voice in the narrative before the narrative decided what my voice sounded like. "One condition," I said. "What's that?" "My daughter doesn't appear in anything. Her name, her school, nothing." "Absolutely," she said. No hesitation. "Okay," I said. "Let's talk." That evening, I made Lily's favorite dinner, chicken with the sauce she calls the orange one, rice, and exactly 4 pieces of broccoli, because she has decided that 4 is the correct number of broccoli, and anything beyond that is an imposition. She told me about her day. There had been a conflict at recess involving a disputed rule in a game, which she had resolved by proposing a vote, which had worked, which she was clearly very proud of. I told her that was a smart solution. She said, "I know, Daddy," with the complete serenity of someone who is not being arrogant, just accurate. After dinner, I helped her with a worksheet about addition. She's fast with it, faster than I was at her age, and when she gets an answer right, she taps the pencil twice on the page, this tiny, involuntary gesture of satisfaction that she doesn't know she makes and I've never told her about because I don't want her to stop. Tap, 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 tap. I watched her work and I thought about Tuesday, about the professional review starting, about Diana's calls, about the journalist and the timeline, about Natalie and her red folder and 2 years of waiting, about Troy and the corner booth and the cold eggs, about Garrett Briggs, whose name was in 3 documents in a folder that was currently sitting in Diana's bag. I thought about the specific sequence of events that had started with a worn latch on a door that no one had reported, and a man who sat down in a chair because his body had finally said enough. And I thought about how sometimes the thing that looks like it's going to destroy you is actually the thing that cracks the surface of something much larger and much older. How the small failure, the 3mm misalignment, the worn latch, the ordinary exhaustion, is sometimes exactly what's needed to expose the thing that was always there, hiding inside the walls. Lily looked up at me. She had a small smear of marker on her chin from earlier, blue that she'd missed when she washed her face. "Daddy," she said, "are you okay?" "Yeah, Bug," I said. "I'm really good, actually." She studied me for a moment with that specific evaluating look she has, the one that's somehow both 6 years old and 45 years old simultaneously. Then she nodded, satisfied, and went back to her worksheet. Tap, tap. I was washing the dishes when Diana knocked and let herself in. She had her laptop bag over one shoulder and the look of someone who had been on the phone for most of the evening. She sat at the kitchen table, her spot now, I noticed, without particularly thinking about it, and opened her laptop. "A few things," she said. "Coffee?" I asked. "Please." I made 2 cups, sat across from her. "The ethics complaint," she said. "My colleague reviewed the document chain this afternoon. She believes there's enough to file a formal professional conduct complaint against Briggs with the state bar. She wants to speak with Natalie directly. With her consent before anything is filed, that's step 1. Natalie already agreed," I said. "I checked with her this afternoon." Diana looked up. Something in her expression, not quite a smile, but the precursor to one. "You're ahead of me." "Habit," I said. "I usually know what needs doing before anyone asks." She looked at me for a moment. Then she went back to her screen. Step 2. The professional review Troy arranged he got the inspector to start today. Initial read of Natalie's shadow report against the official filing. The inspector flagged the same 3 issues Natalie identified. In his words, she looked at her notes. He called the divergence between the 2 documents not attributable to professional disagreement or methodological difference, which is his careful way of saying someone made a choice. "A decision," I said, echoing the word she'd used that morning. "Exactly." She scrolled down. "Step 3 is the one I want to talk to you about carefully." She stopped scrolling, looked at me directly. "The custody modification. I spoke to a family law colleague this afternoon. Just a preliminary conversation, no names. Hypothetical framing. If Briggs accessed your employment records through his role in the building review, and then used information from those records in filings against you in a separate legal proceeding, without disclosing that conflict to either court, that is a serious violation. Serious enough that any modification achieved under those circumstances could potentially be challenged." The kitchen was very quiet. "Challenged," I said. "Reviewed. Reconsidered. Potentially reversed." She held my gaze. "I want to be careful here, Marcus. I don't want to promise you something that depends on facts we haven't fully established yet. But if the timeline holds, and if the document trail supports what we think it supports—" "The 6 weeks," I said. She stopped. "Lily and I lost 6 weeks," I said, "because of a motion built on information he had no right to use." Diana nodded, carefully, quietly. I looked down at my coffee cup. The 6 weeks. I remembered every day of them. The specific weight of a morning where you've made lunch for a kid who isn't there to eat it. The way the apartment sounded in the evenings without her particular specific noise in it. I'd gotten through it the way I got through everything. By working, by waiting, by trusting that the system would eventually balance itself. The system had not balanced itself. The system had been gamed by a man with a prop pen and a smile that didn't reach his eyes, operating quietly inside the walls of 2 separate legal proceedings, connected by a thread he'd assumed no one would ever find. He hadn't counted on a worn latch. He hadn't counted on a chair. He hadn't counted on a man whose hearing gets sharper when he's exhausted, or a structural engineer who keeps everything, or a labor attorney next door with color-coded tools and tortoiseshell glasses who happened to be awake when the world decided to pay attention. He hadn't counted on any of it. "What do we do next?" I asked. Diana closed her laptop. Tomorrow I file the initial complaint with the labor board regarding the administrative leave and the unconsented photograph. Natalie's contact at the ethics board receives the document chain. The professional inspector finalizes his written opinion by end of week. The journalist holds her peace until we give the signal. She paused. Thursday. If everything lands the way I think it will, we give the signal. Thursday. Then we move Thursday. I heard Victoria Hale's voice in my head saying those words to someone on speakerphone in the dark at 4 a.m. She'd been talking about moving something, a deal, a decision, a Thursday that was hers. Now Thursday was mine. I didn't say that out loud. It wasn't something you say out loud. It was just something you know, quietly, in the part of yourself that has been carrying weight for a long time and has just felt something shift. Okay, I said. Diana stood up, gathered her bag, paused at the kitchen door and said, in a voice that was slightly quieter than her professional one, "You're handling this really well. I want you to know that." "I have to," I said. "She's got a math worksheet tomorrow." Diana almost smiled. It was the precursor again, close enough that it counted. Then she left. I washed her coffee cup along with mine, turned off the kitchen light, walked down the hall to check on Lily. She was asleep with her arm around Captain Biscuit. The blue marker smear was still on her chin. I'd missed it during the bedtime routine, too much on my mind. I stood there looking at it and thought, tomorrow morning I'll get it with a warm cloth before school. She'll complain, I'll tell her it's marker. She'll say she knows and everything will be exactly as ordinary as it always is. I needed that, the ordinary, the anchor of it. Because Thursday was coming, and I was ready. Thursday came the way important days always do, disguised as an ordinary one. No dramatic weather, no sign from the universe. Just a regular morning with a slightly overcast sky and the smell of rain that hadn't decided yet whether it was going to commit. And Lily asking me at breakfast why clouds were gray sometimes and white other times. I told her it was about how thick they were. The thicker the cloud, the less light gets through. So it looks darker from below. She thought about this for about 4 seconds and then said, "So the dark ones are just full," and went back to her toast. So the dark ones are just full. I thought about that the whole drive to school. By 8:15 I was back home, coffee in hand, sitting at the kitchen table with my phone face up for the first time all week without dreading it. Diana had texted at 7:52, everything filed, labor board received, ethics board received, inspector's written opinion submitted as supporting documentation. We're ready when you say go. I typed back, give me until 9. I want to call Troy first. Troy picked up before the second ring, which meant he'd been awake for a while. Today's the day, he said. Not a question. Today's the day, I said. How are you feeling? I turned that question over for a moment. How was I feeling? I was feeling like a man who had spent 11 years moving through walls and floors and pressure systems and electrical panels, fixing things that broke in the dark, carrying the weight of structures that thousands of people move through every day without knowing or caring what kept them standing. I was feeling like a man who'd been made into a photograph and a caption and a hashtag and had spent the week quietly, methodically becoming something else instead, something with more edges, something harder to dismiss. Ready, I said. Good. A pause. Natalie's going on record today, too. Her statement goes to the journalist at 9:30, timed with yours. I know. We coordinated last night. Troy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, in a voice that was lower and more personal than his usual register, Marcus, I've known you for 8 years. You've always been the guy who shows up and fixes it and doesn't make a thing of it. I just want to say, it's okay to make a thing of it this time. I sat with that for a second. Noted, I said. And I meant it. The interview with the journalist, her name was Rebecca Marsh, and she had the specific energy of someone who does her best work at the exact moment other people are starting to feel the pressure, happened over the phone at 9:15. We'd agreed on the format. She would ask. I would answer. Everything on the record, nothing embellished, nothing hidden. Just the actual sequence of events, told plainly and in order, by the man who lived them. She started with the shift, the 42 hours, the pressure line, The 14 floors. The secondary log. I told it the way I'd tell it to someone sitting across from me at a diner table. Not performed. Not rehearsed, just true. I told her about the latch, about the chair, about the sleep that hit me the way a circuit trips. Not carelessness, just physics. About waking up to white light. About picking up my toolbox and saying what I said, and walking out with the security team without making it hard. Did you feel afraid? She asked. No, I said. I felt like a man who'd made a mistake and was going to own it. The mistake was sitting in that chair. That's it. That's the whole mistake. And the photo? I paused. Not for effect, just because I wanted to say this part right. I've thought about this a lot, I said. And here's what I keep coming back to. She posted that photo at 4 a.m. She used the word entitlement. She had 100 ways to handle what she found in her office that night, and she chose the one that put my face on the internet while I was still in that building. I want people to think about what that choice says, not about me. About her. Rebecca let that sit for a moment, then, tell me about the pressure system. And I told her. I told her all of it. The timeline, the shadow report, the divergence between what Natalie had found and what was publicly filed, the 26 months that passed while a high-risk pressure differential sat unaddressed in a building full of people. I told her that I'd fixed it at 2 a.m. after 42 hours on shift because that's what the job required. I told her that a report identifying it as a high-priority concern had existed for over 2 years and had not been reflected in any official filing. Are you making an allegation of deliberate suppression? She asked carefully. I'm telling you what the documents say, I said. What that means is for people with more authority than me to decide. She appreciated that. I could hear it in the way she moved to the next question. We talked for 47 minutes. At the end, she said, Marcus, is there anything you want people to know and anything beyond the facts of what happened? I thought about Lily's crayon drawing on the refrigerator. The enormous hands. I want people to know that there are a lot of people like me in a lot of buildings, I said. People who show up before anyone else gets there and leave after everyone else is gone and fix the things that need fixing so that the building works right when the people who matter arrive. And most of the time, nobody thinks about them at all. I'm not saying that as a complaint, it's just true, and I think when something like this happens, when one of those people becomes visible for a second, even in the wrong way, I think it's worth paying attention to what you're actually seeing. Because what you're seeing is someone who was there. Rebecca Marsh was quiet for a moment. Thank you, Marcus, she said. Thank you for getting it right, I said. The piece went live at 11:47. I know the exact time because I was sitting on the floor of Lily's room. Don't ask me why the floor. It just felt right. The carpet and the low afternoon room light and Captain Biscuit watching from the bed. And Diana texted me the link with a single word, live. I read it on my phone, sitting cross-legged on my daughter's bedroom floor. Rebecca had gotten it right, all of it. The headline was simple, The man in the chair, a viral photo, a suppressed safety report, and the worker nobody was supposed to notice. It wasn't sensational, it wasn't performative, it was just true. Careful and true and structured in a way that let the facts make the argument without anyone having to shout. Natalie's statement ran as a sidebar, attributed on record with her full name and credentials. 2 years of silence ended in 4 careful paragraphs. The inspector's professional opinion was quoted directly. The divergence between the shadow report findings and the official public filing cannot be attributed to professional disagreement or methodological difference. The omissions appear deliberate and consequential. And at the bottom, in a section about the legal proceedings that followed the viral post, there was a single paragraph that Diana had worked on with Rebecca very carefully. Questions have also emerged regarding potential conflicts of interest in legal proceedings involving the maintenance worker, stemming from an attorney whose name appears in documents related to the building's infrastructure review. The State Bar has confirmed receipt of a formal professional conduct complaint. No name. Not yet. Careful. Strategic. But it was there. I put the phone down on the carpet, looked up at the ceiling of Lily's room. There was a small glow-in-the-dark star up there that she'd put up herself with a step stool, and a determination that had not accounted for alignment. It was slightly crooked, maybe 10 degrees off from where she'd aimed it. I'd never fixed it. She'd never asked me to. I looked at that crooked star for a long time. The response to the piece was not instant. It built. Not the viral kind of build, not the photo kind, not the 3,000 shares in 2 hours kind. It built the way real things build, slowly and from the ground up, starting with people who understood what they were reading and spreading outward from there. Engineers, building workers, maintenance professionals, people who'd read about infrastructure suppression before and recognized the pattern. Then the broader audience, the ones who didn't know the technical details but understood the human story. The 42 hours, the chair, the latch, the daughter at home with the stuffed rabbit. By noon, the original post, Victoria's post, the photograph, the word entitlement, was being reshared with a different kind of energy than it had been on Saturday. The same image, the same caption, the same sleeping man in the chair. But now people had context, and context, it turns out, is everything, is... The comments had completely reversed. Not the ones from Saturday, those were still there, static, preserved. But the new ones, the ones coming in after the article, they were something else entirely. I didn't read them. I made lunch instead. Victoria Hale released a statement at 2 p.m. I know because Diana forwarded it to me with no commentary, which was her way of saying read it but don't let it touch you. It was 3 paragraphs. The first acknowledged that the photograph may have lacked appropriate context. The second said the company was committed to reviewing its infrastructure reporting processes. The third was about her deep respect for the men and women who maintain our buildings. Deep respect. Diana called me 10 minutes after she sent it. Her board called an emergency session this morning, she said. Before the article even went live, someone inside the company tipped them that the safety report story was coming. They're not happy. How not happy? I asked. The kind of not happy that results in personnel changes, she said carefully. I was quiet for a moment. And Briggs? I said. The Bar Association confirmed receipt of the complaint publicly this morning. His firm's website has already removed him from the listed partners page. A pause. That happened within the last hour. I sat down at the kitchen table. 11 years of maintenance work. 11 years of fixed pipes and worn latches and pressure lines and secondary logs. 11 years of moving through spaces like water through old pipes, silently, constantly, always under pressure, never seen, and a man with a prop pen who had spent 4 years using systems against me, had just watched his name disappear from a website in under 60 minutes. Diana? I said. Yeah. The custody modification. The 6 weeks. How long before? I've already spoken to my family law colleague. She's filing a motion to review the modification on the grounds of compromised legal proceedings. Given the bar complaint and the document trail, she stopped. Then, Marcus, I think you're going to get those 6 weeks back. Not literally, but legally. The modification is almost certainly going to be reversed. I pressed my hand flat against the kitchen table, the same way I'd pressed it against that old beige wallpaper on Saturday morning, when Dave called and the dread was settling in. But this time what I felt under my palm was just solid wood, just the ordinary, reliable surface of a table I'd eaten 1,000 meals at. Ordinary and solid and completely, entirely enough. Okay, I said. My voice came out quieter than I meant it to. Okay, she said back, and she gave me a minute. I picked Lily up at 3:15. She came out of the school doors in the middle of a crowd of kids and spotted me immediately. She always does. She has this radar for me specifically, always has. And her face did the thing it does, the thing where it goes from neutral to completely lit up in a fraction of a second like someone turned on a light inside her. She ran the last 12 feet with her backpack bouncing and her fast shoes flashing iridescent in the gray afternoon light, and hit me at approximately full speed. I caught her, lifted her up. She wrapped her arms around my neck and said, "Daddy," in that specific voice, the one I can't describe, the one that was the reason for all of it. "Hey, Bug," I said into her hair. "Mrs. Patterson says you've been busy," she said. "I have been. Did you fix something important?" I held on to her for a moment. The schoolyard noise around us, kids and parents, and the particular Thursday afternoon energy of a week almost done. The overcast sky that had never committed to rain. The smell of her hair, which smells like the kid's shampoo she's used since she was 2 and will probably use until she's too old to let me buy it for her. Yeah, I said. I think I did. She leaned back to look at my face, the way she does when she's checking whether I'm telling her the full version or the kid's version of something. She has always been able to tell the difference. Good, she said, with complete confidence, like she never doubted it. That evening, a building inspector from the city's infrastructure compliance office called and left a message saying they'd received Natalie's documentation and were opening a formal review of Hale Tower's most recent infrastructure filing. I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I saved it. Diana came over for dinner. Not for any strategic reason, just because I'd made too much pasta again and she'd admitted over text that she hadn't eaten a real meal since Tuesday, which I was choosing to interpret as an invitation. She sat at her spot at my kitchen table and Lily explained to her at length why Captain Biscuit had decided that Thursdays were his favorite day, a preference he had apparently communicated through means that Lily did not elaborate on but clearly considered reliable. Diana listened to all of it with complete seriousness. When Lily was done, she said, "That makes sense, actually. Thursdays do have a particular energy." And Lily looked at her with the expression she reserves for people who understand things correctly, which is a very high honor in the Republic of Lily Reed. After dinner, after bedtime, after Captain Biscuit was positioned correctly and the door was open exactly 4 inches, Diana and I sat at the kitchen table with the last of the coffee and didn't talk about any of it for a while. We just sat. The refrigerator hummed. The crayon drawing with the enormous hands was still on the door. The kitchen smelled like garlic and dish soap and the particular warmth of a room that's been lived in. "What happens now?" Diana said eventually. "The bar review," I said. "The city inspection. The labor board ruling on the administrative leave. Probably a few more news cycles before it moves on to something else." I turned the coffee cup in my hands. "And the custody review. Those things are going to take time." "I know. Are you okay with that?" I looked around the kitchen, at the drawing, at the sunflower magnet, at the spot on the counter where Captain Biscuit had spent all week watching things. "I've been fixing problems in buildings for 11 years, I said. "Some things you patch fast because they're urgent. Some things you have to let settle before you can do the repair right." I looked at her. "I know how to wait when it matters." Diana looked at me for a moment with those observant eyes behind the slightly too large glasses. Then she said quietly, "For what it's worth, you handled this better than most people would have. Better than I would have, probably." "You would have been fine," I said. "I would have been loud," she said. "That's different from fine." I laughed. It came out genuine and a little surprised, the kind of laugh that happens when you're not expecting it. When your body decides before your brain does that something is actually funny. Diana looked briefly startled by it, and then something relaxed in her expression, and we just sat there in the kitchen for a little while, which was good. Which was actually really good. 3 weeks later, the state bar suspended Garrett Briggs's license pending a full ethics investigation. The findings cited a pattern of conflict of interest violations across multiple client matters, including the use of privileged information accessed through one legal representation in proceedings on behalf of a separate client. The language was careful and formal, and said everything it needed to say without saying my name. Jennifer called me the day the suspension was announced. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. She didn't say much. I could tell she was embarrassed, not the deep embarrassed that comes with understanding, but the surface kind that comes with being caught adjacent to something bad. She said she hadn't known. I believed her, actually. That was the thing about Garrett Briggs. He'd operated in the walls the way the worst problems do. The people in the rooms had no idea. I told her what I needed from her going forward wasn't an apology. It was consistency. For Lily. Whatever she could reliably offer, I wanted her to offer it. And I meant that. Lily needed her mother to be present in whatever way she actually could be. I wasn't going to be the wall between them. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're a better person than I've been to you." I didn't argue with her. I also didn't tell her it was fine. I just said, let's focus on Lily, and she said, okay. And we hung up. The custody modification was formally reversed 6 weeks after that. There was no dramatic courtroom moment, no speech, just a filing and a confirmation and a phone call from Diana that I took while I was on a job. A new job, at a different building, better hours, union representation, benefits, the kind of position I should have held 3 years ago but hadn't pushed for because I'd been too busy keeping my head down and doing the work. I was standing in a utility corridor on the 8th floor when Diana called. Warm afternoon, fluorescent lights, the smell of concrete and pipe insulation. My kind of place. It's done, she said. I leaned against the wall, closed my eyes for about 5 seconds. Thank you, I said. Thank your latch, she said, and I could hear the precursor to the smile, the real one. Victoria Hale stepped down from her position as CEO of Hale Towers' parent company 4 months after the article went live. The official statement cited a desire to pursue other opportunities. The unofficial version, which circulated in the business press and which I read once and then put down, involved the board's decision after the city inspection identified 2 of Natalie's flagged concerns as requiring immediate remediation, nearly 28 months after the Shadow Report had first identified them. I didn't feel triumphant reading about it, I want to be honest about that. I didn't feel vindicated in any clean, satisfying way. What I felt was something quieter and more complicated. The feeling of a repair that's been done correctly, that will hold, that won't need to be revisited. The feeling of a thing that was wrong for a long time finally being set right. Not with fanfare, but with the quiet authority of a fixed thing that stays fixed. She'd had 100 ways to handle what she found in her office that night. She'd chosen the one she chose. And that choice had cracked the surface of something that needed cracking. I thought about that sometimes. About how the smallest failures reveal the largest ones. About 3 millimeters of misalignment in a latch that everyone walked past and nobody reported. About how the thing nobody notices is sometimes the only thing that matters. Natalie got a consulting contract with a city infrastructure oversight committee 6 months after she went on record. She sent me a text the day she signed it that just said, 2 years, worth it. I sent back a thumbs up and then after thinking about it, a second text. Thank you for keeping the folder. She wrote back, thank you for the chair. I laughed at that one for longer than was probably dignified. Troy Watts called me every few weeks after everything settled. Not to talk about any of it specifically, just to check in the way he always had. Loose, easy, the low-maintenance contact of 2 men who respect each other without needing to prove it. Sometimes we talked about buildings, sometimes about the kids. He has a son in middle school who started getting interested in engineering, which Troy thinks is either deeply fitting or deeply ironic and can't decide which. One time we talked for 40 minutes about the best way to extend the life of a building's pressure system without full replacement. It was genuinely one of the better conversations I've had in years. Diana. Okay. Look, I'm going to tell this part the way I'd tell it to a friend sitting across from me. Honestly, without making it into something it wasn't yet. Without pretending I have it neatly figured out. She was still my neighbor. She was still the person who'd sat at my kitchen table and opened a folder and asked the right questions and made the right calls and done it all with that specific combination of competence and genuine care that is, I've come to understand, her fundamental mode of operating in the world. She was still the person who listened to Lily explain Captain Biscuit's feelings with complete seriousness. She was still the person with the tortoiseshell glasses and the color-coded tools and the coffee maker that sounds like a small aircraft. She was my friend, a real one. The kind that shows up in the actual emergency, not the theoretical one. Whether it became something more than that, I'm going to say this carefully, I think it was already becoming something more than that. Slowly, at the pace of people who have both been through enough to not rush things that matter. The dinners that kept happening, the easy silences that got easier, the specific way she said my name when something in a conversation shifted from professional to personal, like a different register, lower, more careful. I wasn't in a hurry. Neither was she. And that, the absence of hurry, the willingness to let something good develop at the speed it needed, Felt like the most adult thing I'd done in years. What I'll say is this. On a Sunday morning, about 3 months after everything settled, Lily insisted on making pancakes and also insisted that Diana needed to be present for this event, which she communicated to me by knocking on Diana's door herself before I was even out of bed. Diana showed up in her sweatshirt and her glasses with her coffee and sat at the kitchen table while Lily, with the focused intensity of a very small chef, explained the pancake process step by step. Diana caught my eye over Lily's head, and she smiled. The real one. Not the precursor. The actual one. I turned back to the stove before she could see my face do whatever my face was doing. But yeah, here's what I want to say to the guys on here who made it to the end of this. I know some of you are in it right now. The middle of it. The part where you can't see the shape of it yet, where it just feels like weight. On your back, in your chest, in the 11-year-old scar on your right hand that you never explained to anyone, because explaining it would have required trusting someone and you weren't sure yet who deserved that. I've been there. I was there a year ago. Here's what I know now that I didn't know then. The thing that looks like it's going to finish you is sometimes the exact thing that shows everyone, including you, what you're actually made of. Not in a movie way, not in a triumphant speech way. In a real, quiet Tuesday morning way where you're just still standing and still doing the work and still cutting the cucumber into green coins and still leaving the note in the front pocket of the backpack. Keep the records. Every service log, every timestamp, every piece of paper that says what you did and when you did it and how you did it right. Keep them not because you're planning for a fight, but because your work is real and it deserves to be documented, and because you never know when the truth of what you did is going to be the only thing standing between you and a story someone else is trying to tell about you. Find your Diana. I don't mean romantically, and I mean find the person with the competence and the genuine investment in your situation who asks the right questions and doesn't flinch. They exist. They are findable. You have to let someone in far enough to help, which I know is its own separate act of courage for a lot of us, and hold on to whatever your version of Lily is. Your kid, your nephew, your morning routine, the bread guys. Whatever it is that makes you get up and function like a human being when everything else is telling you to stop. Keep it close. Keep it real. Keep it small enough to hold and large enough to matter. I fixed a pressure line on floors 14 through 17 of a 41-floor building in the middle of the night after 42 hours on shift. I fixed a worn latch on a door that nobody had reported. I fell asleep in a chair that cost more than I make in a month. And then I held it together for a 6-year-old who calls her Rabbit Brave. That's the whole story. That's all of it.